a live sporting event. So this is Laurent. Thanks to Sandy and Beatrice for their presentation. I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to introduce this thesis work on the television production of sporting events live, particularly soccer, and these are filmed, edited, and also with live coverage, and to look at the dynamic at work for the production of this type of event. And firstly, in social science, sporting events are not really covered very much, and this is out of all proportion to the financial weight of these professional environments. And one of reasons for my interest in this work was being able to look at the significance of these events. So what I've noticed is that these programs, this is based on research on programs that had already been put together on discourse, with regard to discourse analysis of televised data. This is an issue of access to the field. When a few of us have properly observed television in the making, and this is actually quite difficult to do. My approach is to go from a representation study to look at how participants, journalists, technicians get together to portray reality in real time. How do they choose shots, slow-mo? How do they go from live to these replays? And how do you change shots? Not much study has been done into this, but it is hugely significant in how this content is perceived. So the idea was to rather than look at a purely transparent live event with this idea that there was some kind of immediacy of production, whereas in fact it's not because it's in real time that there is this immediacy in the media coverage. Of course, you cannot decide much beforehand, very few editorial choices, because of the simultaneity of the action being filmed and then what actually happens in the production room. So my aim is to situate this television program, and particularly sports programs, in space and time in terms of production. So how can images be produced in a way which is hard to imagine when you actually watch the program? What implications are there on how the work is organized on the content, which really ties into the research by Beatrice, Sandy, and Eugénie, as you have just heard, and how practically do technicians, journalists, producers film and comment the actions which are seen on the screen. So the idea is that images are selected on a basis of collective routines, tacit understandings, rather than individual decisions or decisions taken well ahead of time. So I will look at three aspects. Firstly, the method I used, then talk about action replays and how they are produced, and thirdly, shots and off-field shots in production. My approach is empirical and quite detailed. So I did a video analysis of interactions in a control room. I filmed using 2 cameras in a control room for 2 years with Canal Plus producers and control room operators, and I filmed between 15 and 20 matches with 2 cameras, Sunday evening matches. So these are with lots of high viewer ratings. and I filmed behind the screen wall to try and understand how the producer took decisions in real time. And one thing which is not easily realized is that the match is perceived through screens by all operators who are there, be it cameramen, action replay operators or producers. The match is already subject to media coverage by the people doing the media coverage, because it has already been, the shots have been framed. It's basically, you have what is within the frame of the various cameras. So these are quite large arrangements with 25 to 30 cameras, 12 action replay operators, 2 off-site and the rest in the truck, and they suggest action replays to the producers, who then insert them into the program. I'll say a bit more about the method. Transcription was used. I transcribed the verbal content and also to talk about when action replays were done. So this is a screen wall in a control room. So the match is being broadcast. 25 different camera angles are being looked at, plus 12 action replays, and this is the shot being broadcast. These are live shots, the cameras filming in real time, and these are the action replays. So the producer uses a keyboard to switch between these different shots on air. So the cameras are numbered from 1 to 25, and he presses on the appropriate button to put that camera on air. The problem is that different cameras have different angles that all show the same things. You cannot go between every pair of cameras. Some cameras are not showing the action on the pitch. Some show the audience, the spectators or whatever. So you need to make sure you don't miss anything that happens on the pitch, which is the main task of the producer, strangely enough. And of course, not to miss a goal. That is the worst possible sin. So here you see some aspects of the literature, particularly how operators coordinate both remotely and on site, and reassessing the place of technical resources during the match. And as I said, everything that's going on has a form of media coverage before the operators have it. So there's a difference between production of content and media reception, because producers are the first to receive the images they are themselves producing. Back to action replays. Replays are important. Play an important role in how matches are covered. They objectivate what is just being covered, and also they provide a sense of pace. They show things while nothing else is going on. So one of the tasks of the producer is, while nothing is going on, when there's been a foul or whatever, to show a action replay. This is not known beforehand, and it's an extremely short interval of time. So the producer has to ensure that as quickly as possible they can insert an action replay. So I will show you a match sequence which is ordinary. There's a foul, and we'll see how it is broadcast and what goes on in the control room at the same time. So firstly, we had a wide-angle shot on the match. There was a foul called by the referee, and we then had a close-up, which was broadcast, so that the producer chose that and then went to replay. And so now this is what happened for that in the control room, and how that action replay came to be broadcast. You can't see too much, but on the left, those people lined up. The second person is the producer and who sees the monitors. And here we go. So that is the transcription. I wrote down the words, just to mention that in the first part, the player is hit, falls to the ground, then the referee whistles, and then there's a replay which is announced by an operator. What you can see here is the degree to which the replay is lined up well before the foul, and the producer doesn't even need to ask for it. The producer selects it and launches it on air. So that's very, very quick. Between the time when the whistle is blown and when the operator offers the replay is 0.3 of a second. During which time they have prepared the replay, suggested it to the producer, and 1 second later it's on air. So here I looked at the rewind operations. We've looked at the verbatim, but now we can see that the rewind, so we see the operator 6 was selected, and this is how he produces the replay. And before the whistle has stopped blowing, he is already, from the moment when the whistle has already started to blow, he's already rewinding. And you can see that these things are completely invisible to viewers, but are vital to match production, and particularly the pace of the coverage. Here, the replay operator 6 is not the only one to have produced that. In fact, there's a whole load of them producing replays. So there's a race to produce action replays, which is to be the first to rewind and the first to be able to offer a slow-mo to the producer. And in fact, the rule is that the first to offer one wins, which means that the producer doesn't have the time to see what is actually going to be broadcast. Here you can see that operators 4, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on, all offered slow-mos which are not used. And as you said, slow-mo operators, and in fact the whole staff, technical staff, are in extremely precarious positions, because they may cover a lot of matches, but then they may not be called on for the next match because they're all self-employed, and so they need to make sure they get up the queue, because the more visible they are, the more chance there is of them being called back. And one of my interests was to show that this precariousness also leads to production decisions, and operators who want to be visible, they are in this race to be visible, and this speeds up the pace of the match. I wanted to show you another sequence, but I think I'll go straight to the conclusion. I wanted to basically highlight the work of these invisible hands of sports coverage, and report on these practices which are little known, which nevertheless are involved in production. This is a very intentional view, which is to get out of a view focused just on the discourse and on journalism in and of itself, and show that other professions, be it production, sound, filming, which also go into coverage of the match. And leaving this intentionality behind also means taking a different view of the decision-making process, because many things are not actually decided. It's more the product of a social structure in which the participants are engaged. It happens because of the social structure. And I've been attempting to understand these routine norms of collective work and show how that works out in the flesh. And in terms of the critical approach to media discourse, I think we nevertheless need to retain that, but perhaps just shift the focus to include a better understanding of practical operations and not simply criticize media representations, but perhaps offer a critique of the production resources and context in which this representation takes place.